Hey everyone, this is Jess Landano, and I am going to be introducing you all to my final paper topic. The title is going to be Unveiling the Shadows, Shedding Light on Women's Abuse in ICE Detention. When introducing my topic, I think it's important to first give a brief review of the history of ICE and its installment. Here I'm going to explain when, how, and why it was created and its supposed original goals. I'll be sure to include its border enforcement measures, such as increased security along established crossing points in order to push migrants towards more remote and dangerous routes, such as through the desert, and basically how this resulted in migrants taking riskier and deadlier pathways in order to cross into the United States seeking a better life. Next, I'm going to discuss life inside ICE detention centers. Some things I'll discuss are holding cells that have been described to be as cold as freezers, overcrowding and lack of privacy, lack of access to showers, soap, toothbrushes, and feminine products, physical and sexual violence, and separating parents from their children. And this is going to lead me into discussing my final paper topic, which is physical and sexual assault of specifically women in ICE detention. I'm basically just going to discuss the importance of studying this group, and this will lead me into introducing you to my thesis statement. After a lot of tweaking of my thesis statement, I finally decided on a final version, which is going to be the prevalence of physical and sexual violence experienced by women in ICE detention centers highlights a pressing humanitarian concern, necessitating immediate policy reform to confirm their safety, address the systemic shortcomings contributing to the abuse, and ensure accountability for the perpetrators. The theoretical framework I'm going to be using in this paper is going to be a critical framework with a feminist approach. I felt like a critical framework would be the best option because of how much it deals with social systems, justice inequality, social movements, and basically just institutional practices. And then obviously I'm going to be using a feminist approach because the main survivors and victims I'm going to be discussing are women. The pieces of literature that I'm going to be discussing, which will further support my thesis statement, include Trends in Sexual Assault Against Detainees in U.S. Immigration Detention Centers by Liu, Nwadiako, and Parmar. Disposable Immigrants, The Reality of Sexual Assault in Immigration Detention Centers by Zarate. And Medical Mistreatment of Women in ICE Detention by Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. The first piece of literature I will use to discuss the negative impacts of sexual assault, as well as numerical data on percentages of facilities with sexual assault allegations. This is going to be where I draw my quantitative data from. Next, Disposable Immigrants. I am going to be talking about the Prison Rape Elimination Act, an example of a case involving a woman who was sexually and physically attacked, and more statistics about sexual assault complaints. And lastly, Medical Mistreatment of Women in ICE Detention is a video which was posted by Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs in which Senator Ossoff discusses how women in ICE detention centers in Georgia are reported to have been subjected by a DHS contracted doctor to, quote, excessive, invasive, and often unnecessary gynecological surgeries and procedures with repeated failures to obtain informed medical consent, unquote. This video reveals the truths behind medical malpractice behind closed doors of ICE facilities. I think each piece of literature helps me support my thesis statement in different ways and will help me further come up with implications. The case I have chosen to specifically analyze came from an article titled "The Worst Day of My Life. ICE Jail Nurse Sexually Assaulted Migrant Women," complaint letter says, which was written by Jose Olivares and John Washington. In this case, an asylum seeker by the name of Maria reported to have been sexually assaulted and harassed by an ICE nurse at a detention center in Georgia, specifically the Stewart Detention Center, owned by CoreCivic. I'm going to discuss the events that took place, what followed, and what happened to other women who reported similar abuses by the same male nurse. I am going to then discuss death tolls, allegation rates, and further talk about claims of assaults made by female detainees. I felt like this case was specifically important because it shows that abuse towards women comes from everywhere within detention centers, not simply from ICE agents alone, but even from medical staff and other individuals tasked with undocumented immigrant care. The implications that I'm going to be discussing are going to revolve around human rights violations, trauma and psychological damage, loss of trust in law enforcement, systemic malpractice, health and safety risks, and policy concerns. Some possible reform considerations I'm going to discuss are adequate staffing and resources. Here, I propose increasing staffing levels to ensure sufficient personnel to supervise and respond to the needs and concerns of detainees. Some more resources that would be involved here are better medical care and mental health services, providing legal support, language interpretation, and other things that specifically aid the needs of female detainees. This leads me into the gender-specific practices and policies. Here, I want to develop and enforce gender-specific policies and practices that recognize and address specific needs of women. Some things included here would be reproductive health care, menstrual hygiene products, and other things like that. Next, I will bring up transparent and accountable investigations. Due to the high number of allegations of physical and sexual abuse within detention centers, it's important that these instances are actually investigated and taken very seriously, and that these detention centers are not specifically trying to hide what really goes on behind closed doors. So this proposal will ensure that transparent and accountable investigations are actually being conducted to give these women the justice that they deserve. Next would be proper monitoring of detention centers. It has been clear that there has not been very much of any monitoring of these detention centers, and I propose that outside organizations such as nonprofits and NGOs that specialize in female care, health care, mental care, and things like that will be able to supervise these centers to ensure that the workers here are treating the female detainees respectfully, with kindness, and ensuring their safety. And lastly, I want to bring up a policy reform where I will advocate for policy reforms that prioritize the women and their well-being. And this could involve changes to immigration policies as a whole, making better detention standards, and ensuring that there are more resources to ensure that their human rights are being respected and protected. A majority of my research that I've done in the SJHR program has revolved around women's rights and just women's studies. So I'm really excited to have chosen this topic and to be able to expand on the knowledge I've already gained from the program. And I'm really excited to be able to share all of that with the rest of you. I just wanted to leave you all with one powerful quote that I've come across, which says, "Standing behind predators makes prey of us all."